but it got recognition as a subject afterwards. To state this quote, you give the two examples that was of Indus Valley civilization and the Egyptian civilization. Both the civilization were very well developed. When we talk about the Indus Valley civilization, there were citadels, the Great Bath, and ports. And when we talk about the Egyptian Empire, there were pyramids which were built with 23 lakh stones, each weighing around 2.5 tons. I think it was all the effect of planning, which is also known as the essence of management. We can give other examples too to state that management is there since ages, such as that Roman Catholic Church and military forces, as well as in the ancient Greece. Moving ahead to the first phase of the management, that was Vedic culture, where the life of the people was very well organized and they were mostly dependent on the agriculture source as a livelihood. Then, sir, you discuss the Middle Age, where you discuss feudal system. It was the type of the system where landlords give their land to the tenants in exchange of the royalty and service. I think this was the application of the decentralization, where king give the powers to the lower subordinates. And sir, then the introduction of trade took place in the 14th century when Vasco da Gama went to India and Columbus to USA. The phase of mercantilism was there, and the emphasis was given to the people who supported trade. And due to this, the Christians got divided into two types, and they were pedestrian and Catholic. Pedestrian were those who supported trade, and king also protected them from various danger, and Catholic did not support it. Moving ahead, the phase of Renaissance, which is known as rebirth, which means rebirth. In this phase, the scientific development took place. And finally, sir, Industrial Revolution. Sir, Industrial Revolution brought the drastic change in the management theories. And sir, which in today's world also, these theories, most of the theories are relevant in today's workforce also. So today we shall be discussing that how Industrial Revolution led to the development of modern management. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sajid. Next, please.
Sir, I don't see Ashab Ahmed on the list today.
He's not present in the class?
No, sir, he's not present.
Okay. Then please make it very clear on the WhatsApp group that those who miss the chance, they will not get second chance for this activity.
Right, sir.
They may submit the written recap, but they will not be allowed to make the oral presentation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now let us begin with the analysis first. I think Sabiha and Arusa both did a reasonably good job of introduction. And yes, we need to understand this. Maybe she will evolve this understanding because Sabiha, as such, has done her BSc in zoology, and then she is aspiring for a career in banking, and that too in the HR stream. So maybe she'll have to explore this issue further as to how she can, leverage her background to get into this, and what kind of openings are there, especially at the entry level, if she wants to make it to HR in the banking sector. Personally, I'm not aware of this as to how recruitments take place, especially if one wants to get into the HR area in banking. And especially where you want to get into public bank or private banks. Maybe private banks have some entries for recruitments. They have been visiting, like ICICI, and they have been visiting our department for recruitments. But public sector banks especially, how do they recruit for HR. That is something I'm not very clear. So she may have to get more information on that account. And overall, both of them exhibited good communication skills, and I don't know what is the reason for this nervousness which Sabiha at times experiences. Because language-wise, she was very comfortable and articulate also in her ideas. Maybe more exposure to life's experiences will give more confidence to Sabiha. Then Urusa, I'm impressed by your initiatives that you have taken, and I wish you all good luck for your startup. And
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
and it is good that was it a offline course? You went to Jamia to attend this course on entrepreneurship?
No, so the classes were online, but the incubation center we could visit it anytime, and we went there also for a few sessions.
Okay, okay. So as regards Khan Muhammad Sajid, he also did a reasonably good job, and he covered the entire content. Maybe there was just one um, issue which he might have misinterpreted. When I talked about the conflict between the religion and the other institutions, be it state or the emerging mercantile community. So that is where I talked about the division between the Christianity, the two sects which emerged, which even now exist. We call them Protestants, and the other being, what is the other?
Catholics.
Catholic.
Catholics.
Catholic. So you use the word pedestrian for them. That's not the word. Protestants. Okay. Protestants means who protested, and they protested against some of the policies of the church. For example, they wanted a more liberal attitude towards interests, and the original Christianity was not favoring the interest. So overall, the idea is that there was a kind of churning in the society, and there was a kind of tendency to question the existing order of things. So, which is the spirit which in the modern day parlance we call the spirit of inquiry. And as a result of that, only many scientific developments also took place. Many existing notions were challenged, like I told you about uh, Kepler's study of movement of Earth, and he coined this idea that actually the Earth moves, not the sun, isn't it? So, and in fact, he was reprimanded for holding these apparently heretical views. But there was a class of people who was willing to question the existing order of things. So, in that context, I talked about Renasa, the rebirth, that is the spirit of inquiry. And one more thing, when you make an online presentation, this was my suggestion, that make sure that you have light in front, isn't it? Not coming from the back side, because that you are not very visible as a result of it. Isn't it? So all these nuances also we have to keep into consideration. Okay, so we talked about we talked about management practices in the ancient period. We talked about management practices in the medieval period, and then we came to this age of Renaissance and a mercantile community emerging, that indulging in trade, and as a result of it accumulating wealth, and we call it in the world history parlance, we call it Booleanism. So people had bullions and they started accumulating those bullions. Now, what those that wealth led to actually was this industrial revolution. So this mercantile community was no longer confined to then trade. It started producing also, and they became manufacturers. And as a result of it, large factories came into being. So the first organized school of management thought that emerged actually was because of the industrial revolution. Big factories required a particular kind of management. But mind you that we require a particular kind of management only, which was oriented towards production. Because marketing actually was not a concern. Whatever was produced, it was sold in the initial phase. So this is something which you have to keep note, that the first school of management thought that emerged, it focused on the shop floor, the production part. And the focus was that how can we get the twin concepts of management we have discussed earlier, managerial performance we have discussed, the efficiency and the effectiveness.
So
So
can you
the
give
first,
the point, the first thought of,
please say it again.
can you please repeat the point, the one that you was explaining, the first thought of management?
I said there are two ideas of managerial performance that we have discussed, the efficiency and the effectiveness. So the first school focused on the idea of efficiency. The key focus of these thinkers who belong to the first school of management thought is to get maximum output from the given set of inputs. And when I give you an example, I think this would be clear. Some of the big factories that came into being were steel factories, for example, because, for example, auto industry emerged during that period. And one of the support industry for auto industry is the steel industry. And in the steel industry, with huge furnaces and all that, coal handling is a very important component. Generally, those furnaces were heated with coal. So now, how coal is to be? वजी बेटा पापा का फोन आ रहा है कह दो कि क्लास चली. So I was talking about the coal handling part. Now, just to give you an idea as to how the mind of these thinkers who were contributing to the first school of management thought was emerging. Now, do you think there could be a science of handling coal also? And from this example, I will share with you kind of details that these thinkers got into to increase the productivity. Generally, how coal handling takes place. There will be a kind of wagon full of coal would come into the factory, would be dumped at some place, and from there
Sir,
it
you
would
are
be carried.
storing, sir, you are talking about storing coal or handling in a power plant or
Handling,
handling in
handling,
other.
handling. I'm talking about handling. So generally,
Sir,
what will happen is that you will have a heap of coal lying at a particular place, maybe the storage point,
sir, I
and
want to
from
share
there,
my experience.
yes, please go ahead.
Sir, I have worked in thermal power plant for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, there is a coal handling plant in thermal power plant where the coal comes from train bogies.
Hmm.
They they are सर वो पलटी यानी दे आर पलटी जाती हैं वहाँ कोल हैंडलिंग प्लांट में वैगन ट्रिपलर होता है
Yes.
पूरी सर यानी पूरी की पूरी बोगी पलट देते हैं वो लोग फिर बोगी पलट के पूरा कोल यानी स्टोर किया जाता है फिर उसे यानी टीपी बनाते हैं अलग अलग पॉइंट्स बनाते हैं उन्हें फिर उससे सर यानी कन्वेयर से कैरी करके दूसरी टीपी पॉइंट्स पे ले जाते हैं बीच में क्रशर हाउस होता है क्रशर हाउस में उसे क्रश करते हैं फिर स्टोर करते हैं दे स्टोर for 30 days extra. Like if we don't get coal for 30 days, we store it for 30 days, यानी 30 days का रिजर्व रखते हैं.
Hmm.
और जब सर हीट ज्यादा होती है, समर वेदर होता है, गर्मी होती है, तो उस पे पानी डालते हैं, क्योंकि उसमें अपने आप वो फायर पकड़ लेता है, क्योंकि उसका जो वो पावर होती है, एनर्जी होती है, बहुत ज्यादा होती है, तो वो जलने लगता है अपने आप ही. तो और सर उसको हर यानी जब आता है, तो जहां से आता है वो गवर्नमेंट वाले आते हैं उसको चेक करने के लिए कि कोल की क्वालिटी क्या है. वो लोग आते हैं और जो क्वालिटी वहां से भेजी गई है, नई सैंपलिंग करते हैं, उसका पूरा सैंपल, हर डेली का सैंपलिंग होता है उसका, कि कम उसकी कैलोरी कितनी है, कितना उसकी बर्निंग एनर्जी है, तो कैलोरी निकालते हैं उसकी डेली. फिर टीपी से सर वो जाता है बॉयलर में क्रशर हाउस से टीपी के द्वारा फिर वो बॉयलर में जाके बर्न किया जाता है.
Fine. Thank you very much for this input. Now, just to pick up from where you have left, now we are talking of a developed system of coal handling. But imagine the early days of industrialization. The process would be somewhat like this only. Maybe the coal comes to the plant through railroad or through roads, in a cart, in a big truck, and it would be dumped at a particular place and stored, if you use that as a storage house, maybe for 30 days or whatever is your lead time for getting that coal. Now I'm talking about the inward movement of the coal in the plant. So that was the first area where some of these thinkers worked on. And so what would happen? Like, for example, you have a wagon cart through which the coal would be taken to, let us say, the furnace. Now, generally, what will happen? A person would have a shovel. He would lift a kind of a particular weight of coal from that heap of coal and would put it in the that wagon cart. And then once it is full, it would be carried, manually carried to the furnace. Suppose this is the process. This is a very simple process. But these thinkers said that no, this is not all that simple. Even this process can be studied scientifically. For example, let us take the first operation. How much coal you should lift in one go in that shovel? Is there an ideal load which should be lifted in one go? Because they analyzed that if the worker lifts a higher quantity in one go, they noted that the person gets tired early. So actually they realized that there is a particular load. So they tried with different combinations. For example, they would say, okay, in first go, lift, let us say 1 kg of coal. Then they reduced the quantity. Naturally, they were measuring it in pounds. And then they reached to a particular point. They noted that if such a particular weight is lifted in one go, that leads to maximum productivity at the end. So naturally, they found that the ideal load that should be lifted in one go is this. Now, do you think we need equipments also accordingly? We need a shovel that can lift that particular amount of coal in one go. So you have to think through the carrying capacity of the shovel, which should be, matching the quantity which you have worked out. Then they went into other motion studies, as they are called. For example, how should you throw the shovel in the coal? Naturally, people will use their hands. But they said, no, there is a particular way in which if you lift, if you throw the shovel in the heap of coal, you will have minimum exertion to your body. For example, if you throw it like this, that you use your shoulders, you will get less fatigue and you will do it with minimum effort. So they trained the workers to, throw the shovel in a particular way into the heap of coal. And then they said, okay, fine. So they found out the ideal weight that a worker should lift in a uh, the particular amount, and then they also trained him as to how he should throw the shovel, what kind of motions would be most economical and efficient. Then I said it has implications on the kind of equipments that you shall have. So the core point is, now we are coming to the principles that were evolved as a result of all these studies. He said there is one best way of doing every task. That's the first principle.
So can you
And
please
your
repeat
job,
that? Can you please repeat that?
this is very, common sense kind of thing which you can derive from this, that there is one best way of doing every task, every job. And your job as a management is to find out that best way, isn't it? Now comes the second. You have found out the best way. Is there a appropriate person also to do that job? So there is always an appropriate person, and they deliberately did not use the best person, because best generally gives a judgment as to some, maybe the person, for example, you may presume that the person should be physically sturdy. Yes, for some jobs you may require a sturdy person, but for some jobs you may require a lightweight person. For example, if you want to have a jockey, somebody who would ride the horse, for example, and horses were used in a big way in the industry, you need actually a lightweight person. He should not be very hefty. So after you have found out the best way, you have to find out the best person to do that job, the appropriate person to do that job. So your next challenge is to select and then train. That's the second principle. Select the right person and train him appropriately, and teach him that best way which you have worked out through studies, time and motion studies. So now you have two principles. The first principle, best way to do the job, find out the best way, and second, select and train the right person for that job. Now comes the third issue. How do you motivate? How do you ensure that this person gives maximum productivity? Because you have already worked out the right kind of quantities and overall output you are expecting to get in a particular day from a worker. So what could be the best method to motivate?
Financial incentives.
Financial incentives based on achievement of targets.
Sir, job
Yes,
satisfaction.
yes, at that point
They're
of time,
providing them.
the wage system was very popular. Like the wage was paid according to the work that was done by the
Exactly.
labor.
Sir, job
So
satisfaction.
generally you have two methods of payment. What is called the time rate and the piece rate. Time rate is you hire the person for a particular time. For example, 9 to 5, you have to be there with a, let us say, break of 45 minutes for lunch. And whatever work is assigned to you during that period, you have to perform that job. That's time rate system of payment. The piece rate system, what is this? The piece rate system is your
So
output
the
would be, pardon?
so the number of output
Yes,
produced.
exactly, exactly. Your output would be measured at the end of the day and you will be paid as per that. And because you have already worked out the quantities that you expect the worker to produce, and you have evolved a system whereby the output could be measured. For example, if it is coal, you know how much coal you expect to get transported in a particular day. And if the worker achieves that target, you will pay him as per that target. So the third system is incentivize. The third rule is incentivize through piece rate system. Compensate as per the output. Now there is a fourth principle also which is involved. I understand all these three principles are clear. No
Yes, sir.
rocket science. No rocket science is involved.
Yes, sir. It's
There is commonsensical principles. But the fourth principle requires some deliberation. You know, uh, what will be the role of management and what will be the role of workers? I've already told you that when you design a system like this, it has huge implications on the quality equipments that you require, for example. For example, if on a particular day you have to, let us say, shovel a heap of coal, which is in the form of boulders, vis-a-vis, let us say, what your friend just now said, it has been taken to a crusher and it has been crushed and now it is in more of a powdery form. So if you have to transport coal, but which is of, varying density, don't you think that you require different kind of equipments and shovels? And if the workers are busy in searching for the implements, right kind of implements when they come to the factory in the morning, don't they, will they not be wasting useful time for that? So the proponents of this system, they said that there is a very clear distinction between what management will do and what workers will do. All the thinking part will be done by the management and all the doing part will be done by the workers. So management's job is to ensure that right kind of equipments are made available to them in the morning when they come for work, and then workers will come and start doing their work. They don't have to bother about anything else. Every context of the work has to be looked after by the management. The real job will be done by the workers. So the system, presupposes a very close coordination between workers and management and a clear division of work between management and workers. So this is what we call the first school of management thought, which came to be known as scientific school of management thought. And its key proponent, although there were many others who contributed to this school, the key proponent or assimilator of those ideas was a person called Frederick Taylor. So Frederick Taylor was the father of scientific, was classed as, categorized as the father of scientific management. Now, I hope the system is clear. Now let us come to the operational part of it. What were the implications of such a system? It is said that necessity is the mother of invention. I hope you have heard this proverb. hmm? Necessity is the mother of invention. Actually, all these schools emerged when there was a need. So scientific management school was needed in which context? It was needed in a context where production and the output was the key concern. It was an expanding market. Like think of the early days of automobile manufacturers. Their key concern was producing the automobile at the minimum possible cost. And there were enough takers. And that is why mass production, this age of mass production, was premised on this idea that there is a mass market and we are producing for that mass market. So actually, no marketing was required because the demand was already so much. So your job was to ensure that people get that product at the minimum possible price. So only price was the differentiator. If you make it affordable to larger and larger group of people, it would have enough takers. Now, let us look at the content of the scientific management school. We will come to the context, how context also at some stage changed. For example, I have already hinted about Ford and gave you that example that when the World War first occurred, now who would buy the cars? You may produce it at dirt cheap price, but who would be interested in buying cars when there is a war going on which has engulfed major nations of the world? So the context also changed, but I am coming to the content first. Do you think this system of production, what will it do to the workers? Will they be really sufficiently motivated? Even if you have incentivized them through, let us say, so we'll come to this critique also of scientific management. I'm just, hinting at one point, and that is, don't you think this is a very boring system of work from the workers' point of view? Doing a job repeatedly, even if you incentivize through some output-based system, is it sustainable in the long run?
No, sir.
So when we meet next, we will discuss this critique of scientific management, that this was a system actually of production which expected workers to do a particular task repeatedly over a period of time. And that was one of the major reason why this system became, in fact, people started criticizing it as anti-labor, and a system which causes a lot of drudgery on people, especially workers. So we'll discuss this critique, but there is another agenda which I have for today, because somebody asked me a question on WhatsApp as to how should we conduct the interviews, what kind of questions we should ask, because many of you have formed your groups, and now you will be studying you will be preparing for, you know, conducting these interviews. So what do you think should be our approach, or what kind of questions we should ask? Suppose let us take one of the framework. Suppose if you base all your questions on one framework, managerial roles framework, for example. So how can you ask, what kind of probing questions you can ask to the manager whom you would be studying? Okay. Hmm. 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 One thing which I think your second question actually is a very reflective kind of question, but naturally you cannot expect them to have a grounding on theoretical aspects of managerial roles which Henry Mintzberg has proposed, isn't it? That grounding you have. And for example, you know that managers play interpersonal roles, isn't it? But maybe even this term interpersonal may not be clear to them. You can frame your questions in more, uh, uh, using a terminology which may be familiar to them. For
So,
example,
so
yes,
what I
yes,
also feel is like it should be like a conversation, so that they don't
very
feel
true,
like it's an interview. If we'll have
very
it
true.
as a conversation, so they'll be more comfortable in sharing the